Hey everyone, Rua here bringing you the third in my series of job guides. This time around I'm tackling one of the most complicated jobs in the game, a job that has worn that honour since its release many years ago, the Puppetmaster. While Beastmasters and Summoners are common sights among the pet jobs in this game, Puppetmasters are still somewhat rare, even to this day, so I hope that this video emboldens people to try it out. You've probably noticed by now that this video clocks in just shy of 35 minutes. That's a good 10 minutes more than both of my previous guides. While I would have liked to have kept this video to the same length, there was just no way I could have without compromising its content. Anyhow, we have a lot to cover in this video, so let's crack on. In a game revolving around a job system that implies adherence to set job roles, the Puppetmaster is something of a walking contradiction. Defining this job into one set role is very difficult, as while the player themselves is somewhat boxed into the role of a DPS, the automaton that is centre stage for the job can fill nearly every role in the game. So, for argument's sake, the Puppetmaster can be loosely defined as a pet job that doubles as one of many things. It can double as a melee DPS, a ranged DPS, a magic DPS, a healer, and a tank. It uses hand-to-hand as its primary weapon, but again, the automaton doubles as a weapon itself, so you need to factor this in. Its key attributes for the Master are pretty much the DPS standard: accuracy, stall TP, and multi-attack for TP sets, and its weapon skill sets vary as much as any other DPS. However, it also needs to invest in sets that affect its automaton's attributes, which vary wildly. There's many sets that it needs to work on, so I'll go into this later on. The first great thing about the Puppetmaster is that it's very engaging to play. You're rarely ever going to be on autopilot on this job, and given how complex it is, the Puppetmaster serves as a nice break from the norm if you're bored of doing similar things over and over. A Puppetmaster's automaton is also very adaptable, so it brings a great deal of utility to groups should they need it. One role that the automaton absolutely shines in is when it's called upon to tank. When done properly, the automaton is near unkillable, and I'll go into how you do this properly later on in this guide. One ace card that the Puppetmaster has over its pet job brethren is that it doesn't have to be in range of its automaton to issue it commands. While Beastmasters and Summoners need to be within varying ranges of their pets and avatars, the Puppetmaster can keep a wide berth and still issue commands to its automaton. This feature comes in handy more often than people would realise. While it's capable of performing in many group setups, the Puppetmaster is most optimised in a pet-orientated setup, situations where it can bring the niche qualities of its job to bear. Finally, the job is literally one small adjustment away from becoming a very fine DPS job, so the future potential is certainly there if you want to pick this job up. Still, there's quite a few problems that need addressing. Firstly, and most glaringly, the Puppetmaster is a job with a stupidly high skill ceiling, and if you ask me, it's the most complicated job in the entire game. This is absolutely not the job you want to take up as your first main job, unless you have a very strong understanding of game mechanics. Almost as if underlining this, the job is very expensive to new players, who will have to invest millions, if not tens of millions of gil getting the job up to peak performance. Not only do you need to invest in numerous equipment sets for yourself, but you also need to build up the automaton with its own unique equipment. Both of these combined will incur a huge initial cost, and then you need to find the space for all of this equipment. So yeah, if you're a new player, consider this before going forward. A more job-specific weakness is that given the duality between itself and its automaton, the Puppetmaster is difficult to buff up without leaving one of the two behind. This is why I said it shines in pet setups, because in a pet setup all members of the group should be getting the same buffs. Harkening back to my initial points, what will throw players, and what may even throw veteran pet job players, is that the automaton can't be directly controlled. Its behaviour can only be influenced by the Puppetmaster. This is the crux of the job, and it's something that demands a great deal of skill to pull off. Finally, and comparatively speaking, the damage output of the Puppetmaster itself is very poor. It suffers from the same issue that plagues monks, in that while the damage over time from hand-to-hand weapons is good, the weapon skills attached to hand-to-hand weapons are in serious need of an update. Going back to the concluding point of the strength section, the Puppetmaster is literally one job update away from being a DPS job on par with most others. Merit selection on Puppetmaster is fairly straightforward. You're going to want to cap out automaton skills, as that benefits all aspects of the job, and to also cap out repair effect. Going for repair recast is also an option, but ultimately you're getting the same thing either way. It's just a decision whether you'd want a stronger effect less often, or a weaker effect more often. It's up to you really. The second group is also really straightforward. You're going to want at least one merit in both role reversal and ventriloquy. These are pinch abilities with mercifully short reuse timers, so you'd only want to unlock them rather than cap them out. Fine tuning you're going to want 3 out of 5 in. You're mainly meriting fine tuning for the magic defense it provides, and being a job trait means that it's applied across all versions of your automaton. Optimization is without question capped out. Optimization's effect, unlike fine tuning, is a percentage increase that stacks with all other effects. The difference in output with and without optimization is really notable, so max this option out ASAP. A Puppetmaster is nothing without their automaton, so let's begin there. The utility of a Puppetmaster is derived from the various forms, or rather frames, his automaton can take on. When you first unlock Puppetmaster, this is the first automaton frame you'll get, the Harlequin. There's not much to really say about this frame, other than it's not used very often, for the reason being it's not very useful, save for some extremely niche situations. You'll likely never use the Harlequin again, especially after you get one of the following frames. As you level up as a Puppetmaster, you'll unlock quests, one per every 10 levels up until level 50, where you can obtain a new frame and head for your automaton. Frames determine the attributes and weapon skills the automaton has, while the heads used house its AI and determine its actions. Additionally, the frame and head used determine the attachments, or equipment, more on this soon, the automaton can use by affecting its elemental capacity. Again, more on this soon. Frames and heads can be mixed and matched for various effects, but generally speaking you'll often want to use a matching frame and head. If you've burned this job to level 99 then you can quest these frames back to back. Just make sure you get all of them though. I'll give you a rundown of all of them now. The Sharpshot frame has the strongest DPS of all the automaton frames. It will generally stay at range and shoot unless you force it to engage up close, which I advise you do by deploying it next to its target. Having access to piercing damage makes the Sharpshot a bane to anything that flies. The Sharpshot is very easy to control, as its AI isn't very complex, but do keep an eye on its HP when it's deployed up close. It's quite fragile. The Valor Edge frame is your go-to frame for tanking. Possessing an extraordinary level of durability, this frame can take a serious beating before it falls. It's no slouch as a DPS either, so you can turn it into a really good skill chain partner if you set it up right. The problem with the Valor Edge is that it has an unconventional way of tanking and cannot cast spells like Flash for more enmity. As such, any good DPS will eventually take enmity off of it. The Stormwaker frame provides support through enhancing magic, but it's generally restricted to only casting said magic on the Puppetmaster. Its value is diminished somewhat with the advent of Trust magic, but it still has its uses. The Stormwaker is also used as the base for 2 other frames I'll go into later on in this guide, as they need their own dedicated sections. Before you get started on Puppetmaster, you need to pick up some attachments. Way back in the day, attachments, especially some of the more coveted ones, were notoriously difficult to obtain, but through some quality of life updates, developers made it really easy for you to pick them up. Every single attachment can now be bought from 2 NPCs in Nashville, but the higher level ones are still locked behind job level requirements before you can purchase them. Some attachments give your automaton varying effects like increased accuracy, attack, and evasion. Others have passive effects like making your automaton ignore the defense and evasion of its target. And finally, others give the automaton job abilities when you equip them. You're going to want to pick all of these up, and when you look at the price tag on some of them, you can see why I said that this job is expensive to get out the gate. On the bright side though, once you get an attachment, you don't need to rebuy it. So think of it as component shopping for a new PC you're building. You want the best components for your motherboard, but when you have it sorted, it's sorted. Buying attachments is only the first part of a 2-part process. You'll need to actually install your automaton's attachments, otherwise they'll just sit in your inventory gathering dust. To install attachments on your automaton, you'll need to take them to the automaton workshop in Arturg on Whitegate, and trade them to a certain NPC who will install the attachments for you. Remember, when an attachment is installed, it can't be removed, so be sure to spend wisely if price is an object. When your attachments are installed, you'll then need to equip them. Puppetmaster actually has 2 equipment selection menus. The first is your standard menu, which you select your own equipment. This menu you can quickly access by pressing Ctrl and E at the same time. The second menu, on the other hand, is for customizing not only your automaton's frame, but also its attachments. You can equip a maximum of 16 attachments to your automaton, so you don't have as much room to experiment as you do with your own equipment menu. You'll also notice that each of your installed attachments has an elemental capacity value on them. Each automaton configuration has a maximum elemental capacity it can bear. The more attachments you equip with recurring elemental affinity will contribute towards this cap. So, equipping the Tension Spring 4 uses up 5 points of the Valor Edge's fire capacity. This means you can't just pile on all the attachments you have. You need to be selective for the situation at hand. I'll go over my recommended loadouts later on in this video. Keep in mind that your automaton can only be customized while it's deactivated. So to emphasize a previous point, you need to be prepared for what may come your way before you proceed and activate it. I guess the closest in-game analogy to this is a blue mage not having access to their spells for a whole minute when any spell is changed out. Attachments have elemental affinity because their effects are activated by a series of job abilities Puppetmasters get, maneuvers. Maneuvers can only be used when you have an animator equipped in your range slot. There's a handful of animators around, but generally speaking the two you'll ever use are the Divinator and, better yet, the Animator P. The Divinator drops from most high-tier battlefields, while the Animator P is crafted and can be bought from the auction house. Not only are these essential for directing your automaton, but they're also used to give it attribute bonuses, and more importantly to give it eye level. Your animator should never leave your range slot for these reasons. I know that this is a lot of information to take on board, but there's more resources available online than just my outline of a guide. In particular, someone took the liberty of compiling a written summary of most things automaton related, so rather than sound off the effects of every single attachment, I've included a link to this page on the Blue Guarda wiki, which has all of them listed. I'm not sure who compiled this page, but kudos to you, whoever you are. I recommend new Puppetmasters keep this page bookmarked for quick reference while you get used to what your attachments actually do. I previously mentioned maneuver abilities, but now I'm going to explain them in depth. Maneuvers not only give attribute bonuses concurrent to the maneuver you use, but they also activate attachment effects, and in some cases affect the AI of your automaton. Fire maneuvers, for example, will increase the strength of your automaton, and will also activate all fire-based attachments you have equipped to it. You can stack up to 3 maneuvers of one element to max out an effect, but you'll rarely ever do this, save for some very exceptional circumstances. Maneuvers also influence the spells and weapon skills your automaton will use. Spamming the same maneuver over and over builds up burden. Burden is an invisible counter which ticks up whenever maneuvers are used, but immediately begins ticking back down. When too much burden is accumulated, your automaton is hit with an ailment called overload. An overloaded automaton is weakened and won't respond to maneuver commands. The duration of the overload depends on how badly you overstep the burden threshold. The chances of overloading are reduced by keeping your attributes close to your automatons, as well as using certain pieces of equipment when maneuvers are used. The base duration of maneuvers is 1 minute, but it steadily increases to 5 minutes if your automaton has spent enough time engaged, and if enough time has passed without your automaton overloading. As long as you balance out the maneuvers you use, you should rarely ever overload, but you still need to be aware of using maneuvers immediately after activating your automaton, as a freshly activated automaton comes with high levels of burden and it needs time to cool down. To use 2 more tech analogies, you can think of overloading as what happens when you bottleneck your CPU by pushing it too far, or you can just look at it as what happens when you accidentally DDoS your own automaton. I'd best showcase the gear that lowers your overload rate. A lot of this is very simple to get, but as long as you're smart about it, you'll only ever use the Empyrean Body, the Artifact Hands, and the Ambuscade Mantle. I don't advise using the Midnights, as they require you to change your weapon in and out for their effect. But if you're not engaged yourself and your automaton is in a jam, then by all means go for it. There's also 2 attachments which affect overload rates. The Heat Sink will reduce your overload rate by increasing the rate of burden decay, while the Condenser will consume a water maneuver to prevent an overload. You'll rarely ever use these attachments, but they are there if you're starting out and you're a bit uncertain as what to do. Activate does what it says on the tin. It activates your automaton with a frame, head, and attachments you customized it with. Something you need to watch out for is that Activate has a very long reuse timer, 20 minutes, so getting your automaton destroyed shortly after it's been activated could be really bad. Activate's timer will be reset if you deactivate your automaton at 100% HP, but with job points this becomes 80% HP. Deactivating then reactivating an automaton will fully restore its MP pool, if it has one, but keep in mind your maneuver duration will fully reset if you do this. Overdrive is a Puppetmaster's SP ability, and it's a good one. In fact, for what it does for the job, and relatively speaking, I'd say it's one of the best SPs in the game. Overdrive does an absolute essay of things for your automaton. Firstly, it completely suppresses overload while it's active. Secondly, and with job points invested in it, it gives plus 100 to every attribute the automaton has. Thirdly, it gives a massive increase to all of the automaton's other parameters, like accuracy, attack, and magic evasion. Fourthly, it gives the automaton an effect similar to fealty, by greatly increasing its resistance to status ailments. Fifthly, it caps the automaton's job ability haste, and finally, it makes one maneuver give the effect of 3. This means you can use 3 different maneuvers at maximum power. Overdrive has a maximum duration of 3 minutes and 30 seconds, but that's often all the time you're ever going to need with it. Overdrive lets you do some absolutely insane things with your automaton, ranging from giving it a nearly 300 HP per tick regen, to making it more or less unkillable, to making it capable of self-skill chaining endlessly for its duration. Since it causes one maneuver to have the effect of 3, it's a good idea to have a specific attachment loadout for Overdrive when you know you're going to be opening a battle with it. An overdriven automaton can really tear through targets even with no support. With support it just gets absurd. Some attachments I'll go into later, like the speed loader, benefit a great deal from overdrive. It's a blast to use overdrive, so make the most of it while it's up. Deus Ex Automata activates your automaton with low HP, and with its burden set very high. Deus Ex Automata is an emergency ability that's only to be used if your automaton is destroyed unexpectedly, but you'll never use it if you actually have your activate timer ready. Another way to use it well is if you, the Puppetmaster, are somehow killed and your automaton is destroyed in the process. Say you're revived, but you have no activate timer ready. In a situation like this, you can use Deus Ex Automata, repair your automaton to max HP, and then deactivate and reactivate it to get it back to full functionality. Repair instantly restores a set percentage of your automaton's HP, and also gives it a stacking regen effect, with the potency of both effects dependent on the quality of the automaton oil you used. You need an automaton oil in your ammo slot to use repair, so keep a good supply on hand. Maintenance follows similar rules, but rather than restore HP, it removes up to 4 status ailments. Repair can also be made to remove ailments, but not as many as maintenance, by having the artifact feat equipped during the use. Automaton oils can be bought from an NPC in Artogon Whitegate, so keeping a stack or 2 nearby shouldn't be difficult. Role Reversal is a really useful ability which instantly swaps the HP of the Puppetmaster and their automaton. You can use this as a last-ditch cure to keep your automaton alive if all else has failed, or you can just use your automaton's HP to save yourself if you end up in trouble. Ventriloquy instantly swaps the enmity of the Puppetmaster and their automaton. This ability used to be the main way that Puppetmasters established enmity on their tanking automatons, but ever since a few updates ticked by, its practical use has somewhat diminished. Still, there are some neat tricks you can use with Ventriloquy. If your automaton is set to tank, you can open a battle with you, the Puppetmaster, using Provoke with an enmity set, then using Ventriloquy to transfer that enmity to your automaton, then letting it use its own enmity tools to make sure that your target is stuck on it. Tactical Switch swaps the TP of the Puppetmaster and their automaton. You can use Tactical Switch in a few ways, but I'm quite fond of giving my automaton my TP so it can use 2 weapon skills back to back easier. Check your situation and make the right call whether to use it or not. Cooldown does 2 things. Firstly, it reduces the total burden accumulated across all maneuvers, and secondly, it will erase overload if it's on your automaton. Cooldown is a real get out of jail free card if you push your automaton too hard. Hiatus is a Puppetmaster's second SP, and it does one of a number of things. Hiatus causes the automaton to use the SP that is native to the head it's currently using. So, if using the Valor Edge head, the automaton will use Invincible, which is a fantastic instant enmity tool if you're in trouble. The Sharp Shot head forces Eagle Eye Shot. The Stormwaker head uses Chain Spell, which is great for rapidly buffing yourself in a pinch, or for burying a target in debuffs. We've come to the tips, tricks and tactics section of this guide, but this time around, and in addition to the usual, I'm going to address the two omitted automatons. I'm also going to go into my preferred setups for the frames. Odds are the first thing you're going to want to do is skill up your automaton. Automatons have their own combat skill categories which need to be capped. You might see that there's no skill up books for automaton and instantly despair, but don't worry, there's a really simple way to cap both melee and range skill. What you want to do is use this attachment setup and find a Wild's Keeper Reeve during a quiet spell, which is honestly the hardest part of this entire process. The main attachment you want to have on is the Percolator, which greatly increases your skill up rate. You'll want to use a maneuver setup of Wind, Light and Water. This caps your automaton's haste, activates its regen and activates the optic fibers, and also activates the Percolator. Then it's just a case of maintaining these maneuvers. The good thing is that the duration of the maneuvers increases as time passes, so when you reach the 5-minute duration on your maneuvers you can really just tab out and reapply them every now and then. This should cap your melee and range skills relatively quickly. For capping magic, it's just a case of using the Stormwaker solo. The first tip I need to give is more a point of urgency. The gifts that Puppetmaster gets from job points are crucial to the job performing the best it can, especially at endgame level. The biggest thing Puppetmaster gets are the gifts at 100 and 1200 job points respectively. These gifts increase the elemental capacity of each automaton frame by 2, twice for a total of 4 extra capacity. When you see the requirements of the top end attachments, you'll see why this is so essential. These 4 points let you use both tiers of the optic fiber on all of your automatons, which you absolutely need for any given situation worth writing home about. I advise that you don't attempt anything high end until you have this done. You need to get 1200 job points before you go to endgame. The attuner and the target marker are very powerful attachments, but they're not always necessary. The attuner makes your automaton ignore a percentage of its target's defense if said target is a higher level than itself, whereas the target marker does the same thing, except that it applies to evasion. Since you're already using more than one fire or thunder maneuver, you'll be getting an effect of roughly 20% from each. This of course is much higher under overdrive. With the advent of Geomancer debuffs, these attachments have lost some of their appeal, but they're still fantastic to use when you don't have a Geomancer around. I typically solo on Puppetmaster, and therefore rarely have a Geomancer with me. Next up, I'd like to explain how to skill chain with your automaton. I'm very fond of both the inhibitor and the speed loader attachments for this purpose, so I'll give you a rundown of them both. As I mentioned earlier in this guide, maneuvers influence the AI of your automaton, and normally dictate which weapon skills it will use. The inhibitor overrides this function, and forces the automaton to hold TP if it detects that the Puppetmaster also has TP. With the inhibitor equipped, the automaton will wait until it detects a weapon skill, and then it will close the highest level skill chain it can with a weapon skill that will. This makes controlling multi-step skill chains very easy. The speed loader forces the automaton to wait until the very last second of the skill chain window before it continues the skill chain, giving you more time to get your TP back up for the next step. The speed loader also gives a massive amount of skill chain bonus to your automaton, so you can reach some impressive skill chain damage if you successfully multi-step. Sadly, while skill chaining between the Puppetmaster and the automaton is relatively easy, given how well the automaton's weapon skills skill chain properties interact with hand-to-hand weapon skills, it's much harder to make your automaton skill chain with party members, for the simple reason that most have ignored Peton. When trying to maximize the DPS of the sharp shot frame, there's a trick that you can use. The AI of the sharp shot head will make the automaton stay away from its target and shoot for TP, unless it's deployed right next to the target. Shooting for TP isn't viable, as it's too slow even with the drum magazine equipped, so you need to make sure it's meleeing and shooting by being in range. The sharp shot frame doesn't suffer from a distance damage correction by shooting point blank, so this is indeed viable. You can make the automaton do this by equipping it with a Valor Edge head while retaining its sharp shot body. The elemental capacity adjustments are easily negotiable, and not having to constantly force your automaton to stay in range is really helpful. When you get around to meleeing alongside your automaton in earnest, you're going to want to be in a hybrid TP set. This set is essentially a base TP set with some minor adjustments to facilitate your automaton. What you want from this set is a balance of accuracy, store TP and multi-attack for both yourself and your automaton, but above all, you need to make sure that you both have your equipment haste capped. You can cap the equipment haste of an automaton, which has the same cap as a player character, with the ambuscade cape, some HQ ambuscade feet, and the Kluskap sash. You can use the Otaz as your weapon in place of the sash, which would free you up to use the Moonbow belt, but that's really up to you. I've often found that a maneuver setup of fire, light and wind works well enough for a sharp shot automaton that you're skill chaining with. Although it's not fully magic haste cap with this setup, the reduction of the weight between its ranged attacks and the rate that double shot activates from the repeater more than makes up for it. If overdrive is active, then it is fully haste capped. If you're a returning subscriber, then you may have seen one or two videos featuring my Valor Edge automaton, either as a DD against Belphegor, or more likely as a tank against Fu. Now it's time for me to be going into the detail about how you can make your own automaton into a brick wall of a tank. Again, I provided the attachment loadout here, and I'm about to go into the mathy parts of about why the automaton is so resilient, and how it tanks, and more importantly, how it can hold hate. To understand why the Valor Edge is so sturdy and how it tanks, you first need to understand how it gets so much damage reduction and how this affects its enmity loss. What's not so obvious is that each automaton frame has a varying degree of damage taken reduction attached to it, and that every frame is affected universally by the start servant trait. The numbers on screen at the moment lay out how automaton DT is calculated. I've linked the equipment set, the DT set I use in the description of this video, but there are other ways, through adjusting one or two pieces to reach the full DT cap. I just found that this set has served me well. A while back I made a video of my automaton tanking a fully raged Fu. In that video I skimmed over the enmity mechanics of an automaton and how it can hold a target's attention. I've linked that video below as well, but now I can go into how it really works. An automaton holds hate through the use of its abilities which generate enmity for it, and through the way enmity loss is calculated. Enmity loss from cumulative enmity is determined by the maximum HP of a player or an automaton being set against how hard it's being hit. Since a Valor Edge automaton has so much HP, and since it's getting hit for so little, most cumulative enmity it generates it tends to keep. So, you've got two options really. You either let your automaton build up enmity over time, but that's not really practical when you think about it, as any good DPS is going to overtake its CE before you know it. Alternatively, you let the Valor Edge tank in fights where enmity is either tightly controlled or it's completely disposable, like with summoners or beastmasters. This is what I meant during the job's overview. This tactic's really effective for pet setups, but it's very hard to pull off for melees. The last thing you need to know about Valor Edge tanking is that with the resistor, and especially with overdrive active, it's near immune to all status ailments, unless said ailments have 100% accuracy. The Valor Edge, and automatons in general, are also completely immune to both charm and death. If for some reason repair and the constant regen aren't cutting it, consider carrying a small stock of Dawn Mulsums in case of an emergency. Mulsums will instantly recover a decent amount of the automaton's HP. Mulsums are also cheap, but honestly I rarely ever use them. I can only ever recall using them against Tellus, or against Fu if something has gone spectacularly badly wrong. Still, they're an option should you need them. The Stormwaker has sadly not matured well with time. Back in the day, it was arguably the most valuable automaton for solo play, but through job updates and especially with the advent of trust NPCs, these days you'll rarely ever use the Stormwaker. There is, however, a very neat use for it, even if the use isn't really high level content. The Stormwaker is really useful in times where trust NPCs aren't available, like in Salvage or Nice Lyle. Say you're just starting out on Puppetmaster but you need some steady cash. The Stormwaker would be your best option should you want to farm salvage. If you can afford the attachment slots, consider putting the heat capacitor onto the Stormwaker and turn it into a TP battery. This will speed along your salvage runs nicely. The neat thing about the Stormwaker is that it actually casts Phalanx and Stone Skin directly onto you, which is something actual red mages can't do outside Scholar Sub. This is the Soul Soother automaton, and it's quite useful. The Soul Soother is a white mage and differs from the Stormwaker in a few ways. First, it has a damage gauge built into it, so it'll automatically prioritise curing whenever it detects a party member in mid to low HP. Secondly, and on that note, it's not selfish like the Stormwaker and will cure party members. Third, it has access to NAR spells on a race. And finally, it has access to Benediction, which can save fights that have gone south. The Soul Soother requires a fair bit of know-how and requires a very specific gear set to function properly. The Soul Soother needs a very specific equipment set, which also, and unfortunately, takes the Puppetmaster out of the fight, lest they actually be a hindrance to their automaton. The set you want is a Naga Samyue set from Eshka-Zitar, and you want it augmented along the C path. It provides more or less everything that makes the Soul Soother excel: MP, fast cast, and cure potency. In situations like this, and with this set equipped, it'd actually be better to sub White Mage yourself and assist your automaton with removing ailments. Alternatively, you could just melee and use your regular sets, but expect to see a drop off in the Soul Soother's performance if you do. If you're taking damage and getting hit with ailments, the Soul Soother tends to prioritise you over your party members, so be aware of this if you need to main heal a lot of people. The Soul Soother also lacks Curaga, so the more people in range means the harder the time it's going to have. Finally, if it somehow runs out of MP, you can just reactivate the Soul Soother between fights to refill it. The final automaton I need to talk about is the Spirit Reaver, and again, I couldn't find a way to replay the cutscene for it. The Spirit Reaver also uses the Stormwaker as a base frame, but instead fills the role of a Black Mage. The Spirit Reaver focuses on maximising burst damage during skill chains, and if properly set up, with proper equipment and with some small support, it can do some decent damage. However, to say that this automaton needs a lot of skill to use properly is a bit of an understatement. The Spirit Reaver has a number of issues that really hold it back, and almost all of them stem from its AI. The main issue that you have with the Spirit Reaver is that you can't directly control it, so it'll cast whenever it wants and you can't control what it's going to cast. The Spirit Reaver also demands that you have good reflexes. When skill chains are made for it to burst off of, you have a matter of seconds to snap into a full nuking set for it, the set that you see here, or its nuke is going to be weak as it's going to slam into a magic accuracy check and likely fail it. Also, the Spirit Reaver needs constant use of ice maneuvers to keep its damage high, as the ice maker you will be using with it consumes maneuvers with each nuke it lands. This means that the Spirit Reaver is very liable to overload. There's some things worth noting when you're using the Spirit Reaver. There's a food that was recently added that complements it quite well. Marine stew pots give both the master and the automaton accuracy and, more importantly, magic accuracy in pretty large quantities, but the food itself is a bit expensive. Still, if you're using the Spirit Reaver for a group, then try to use it. It's also worth noting that with job points invested, repair also restores the MP of your automaton, so if the Spirit Reaver is running low on MP, try and top it up. Finally, since you're typically running both mana channelers with a Spirit Reaver, its recast timers will be very long, so timing nukes can be quite hard. This brings me to the end of this guide. I know that this was a lot of information to take on, but believe me when I say you'll learn even more about the job if you opt to pick it up. Before I end this video though, I'd like to discuss what the problem is with a Puppetmaster's DPS, because the issue is a wider one that affects monks as well. Even when not exploiting targets weak to blunt damage, the damage per hit hand-to-hand weapons deal is actually quite competitive. The problems arise when weapon skills are thrown into the mix. Hand-to-hand weapon skills are in desperate need of an update, even a slight one that's so simple. Here's a point of comparison. On paper, Victory Smite and CDC are actually very similar. Both are 3-hit weapon skills with 80% weapon skill modifiers, and both have the exact same chance to critical hit. There's only one glaring difference between them. CDC copies FTP while Victory Smite does not. The fix to Victory Smite, and by extension Stringing Pummel, is so obvious, but it still remains untouched. Hand-to-hand weapon skills either have very low FTP or FTP that does not transfer. It's annoying at times, but it's going to take that one small fix to bring hand-to-hand DPS more in line with the competition. Even then, it may take more than that, but I digress. This is really a topic for another time. This just about covers the basic basis for Puppetmaster, so I'll leave it here. Cheers for sticking around for this long if you did. This was a lot longer than my previous efforts, but I hope it was all the more informative. Any further questions, either leave me a message here or ask the folks on the Auction House's Puppetmaster forum. They're an approachable bunch. Until next time, take care.